So my topic today is Evidences for a Young Earth, and I'm John Kinzer. I'm a board member at Noah Webster College. There are two big explanations for how the world came to be. One is the uniformitarianism, or the uniformitarianist position, and that is a person who believes that the present, what we see today, happening today, present processes are the key to the past. In other words, everything that has happened in world history has happened at the same rate that we see things happening today. Erosion, deposition, everything is matched. And so this is the position that evolution requires and insists upon long periods of time for there to be enough time, enough opportunity for mutation to take place and changes to take place in organisms. So those changes all take place by chance. There's no direction in the change, so it's time plus chance is uniformitarianism. So by necessity, evolution requires that, and we see these billions of years. The other explanation for the world is catastrophism. And a good catastrophist would say that there have been big catastrophes in the past, volcanic eruptions, earthquakes, there have been floods. Of course, Noah himself was a catastrophist. He was of that opinion. He saw it happen. And so this is where the biblical account of creation lays very solidly on catastrophism. And so we see these things today. For instance, we see catastrophes happen when Mount St. Helens blows its top and plugs up Spirit Lake, so that Spirit Lake piles up, and then breaks through this big earth slide, and then carves in one day a canyon that's 450 feet deep. We see that's a catastrophic occurrence. Earthquakes. The biggest catastrophe that some people, and it's difficult to kind of chronicle this, but is a big meteor crash into the Gulf of Mexico, just off the Yucatan Peninsula, leaving a big hole. And they believe this happened at the end of the Cretaceous and caused the, quote, Cretaceous extinction. Threw up so much material in the sky that the world was cooled, and the dinosaurs went extinct. And so evolution attributes that catastrophe. So evolutionists do recognize catastrophes. They just sort of only certain catastrophes will they like to hang their hat on. Another example would be Krakatoa, the eruption of Krakatoa, where an island in the Sunda Strait between the island of Java and Sumatra literally blew off the map. I believe that was 1889, and that was the year that in North America we had no summer, and the ash and the material in the sky literally kept our temperatures 20 degrees lower. The Hudson River had ice into June. The Hudson River was iced over. And so if the Hudson River is iced, you can bet they're not planting grapes and wheat in upper New York State. So there was some farming in our nation, but we really went through a time of economic trial because of that one event that took place. Even today we see an Icelandic volcano grounding airplanes in Europe, and billions of dollars of lost revenue, and again, a problem that results from that. So these are all catastrophic kinds of times and examples. There are 12 natural phenomena that I'm going to mention that the maximum, and I'm going to go through basically. Russell Humphreys put together these things in a handout that we've made available to you. It's free, and you can pick it up off the book table in the foyer. But basically, in this, he shows 12 ways that you look at the maximum possible ages that are needed for each of these 12 processes to occur is always less than the ages required for the evolution model. So as we look at each one, you'll see that each one can happen in a very short period of time, much less than the evolution model would indicate. Secondly, the biblical age of the earth, somewhere between 6,000 to 10,000 years, depending on who you read, who you ascribe to, the biblical age always fits within these ages of these 12 phenomena. And so these are things that are observed in nature that can be very, very helpful, particularly as you're trying to explain to others that there are ways of seeing the earth in view of a young age to our world and the universe. So here are the 12 that Russ Humphreys has guided us through in this paper of his. Number 1, he mentions that galaxies wind themselves up too fast. In other words, when we look at the shape of galaxies, spiral galaxies, if in a galaxy, the center part of the galaxy, the stars are turning much slower than the outer stars on the outer arms of the galaxies. So as the galaxies wind and turn, there is a point, if this has been going on for a long, long time, that they'll actually pull together into a mass rather than keeping their pinwheel look. So the fact is that, and here's a problem with evolution, it's an evidence for a young Earth, a younger universe, is that these galaxies wind up too fast for the long ages that evolution requires. A second one, comets disintegrate too quickly. So as we see comets, which have a period, they go to the sun and then they go out again, away from the sun, and then they come back, they're attracted, pulled by the sun's gravity, and they have a period. So I believe Halley's Comet has an 86, or maybe it was a 76, was it 76 year period? So it would return every 76 years, and you can just bank on that. You know when it's going to appear. That's because Halley's Comet and the other comets are made of ice and rock, and supposedly came about at the creation of the universe. They were stuck in space, and they're just being pulled by the sun. But the solar wind of the sun is pushing away the ice and rock, creating the big tail on the comet. So the comet's getting smaller. Every time it goes around the sun wears away at it. I can remember talking with a man in Virginia who had seen Halley's Comet in, I believe it was 1910. It was that, not the last time it appeared, but the previous time. And he remembers being a little boy looking up at the sky. He said the tail was quite impressive. He saw it. It was very evident across the sky. And then I remember, I think it was 1986, seeing Halley's Comet return. He was still alive, although he was blind. He couldn't see it anymore. He was an old man. But I went out, looked at it, and I remember I could not see the tail except with binoculars. So the tail had gotten much, much smaller, indicating the comet was smaller, and it's gradually disintegrating. So that's a problem. Why? How could you have a comet at the beginning of the creation, which is now wearing away so quickly? They're not going to last that long. That's a problem for long ages. Thirdly, not enough mud on the ocean floor. And I'm going to cover some of these in more detail, but the ocean floor does not have the amount of mud deposited on it for a 5 billion year old Earth. It's way too small amount of mud deposited. Number 4, not enough sodium in the sea. The present amount of sodium in the sea that's washed off the continents, and we can put a number to that activity. We can actually know how fast that's happening. That sodium that is in the sea today could have accumulated in only 42 million years at the present rates at which sodium is entering the oceans. So again, that doesn't require 5 billion. We're looking at a much younger age for the Earth, 42 million, assuming the sodium came in at the same rate that we see today. Number 5, the Earth's magnetic field is decaying too fast. That presents another problem, the decay of the magnetic field. 6, many strata are too tightly bent. So we see strata in mountain ranges where they've been bent, and they apparently were much younger than they've been attributed in evolutionary timescale. Number 7, injected sandstone shortens geological age. So there's, and we'll be covering that a little bit later, in Colorado we see this situation. And again, these are all evidences for a younger Earth, not an old Earth. Number 8, fossil radioactivity shortens the geologic ages to just a few years. So the radioactivity that we see in some fossils and that we see in radio halos, which are not fossils, but they're diminishing over time, they actually would shorten the age, the perceived age of the Earth, not lengthen it. And then there's 4 last ones. Number 9, helium is in the wrong places. Helium is a gas that is exuded from the Earth and through radioactive decay from all radioactive rocks. And that helium, being very light, works its way up through the layers of rock and goes into the atmosphere. Today we see very small amounts of helium. We should see massive amounts of helium in the atmosphere if the Earth were 5 billion years, for instance. Not enough Stone Age skeletons. We actually see the skeletons that from the Stone Age, and we have a very small number of those compared to the literally billions that we should see as a result of a 100,000-year-long Stone Age. There should be somewhere between 4 and 5 billion skeletons that we would have found, and we have found very, very few, just in the thousands. So apparently the Stone Age, much shorter than what it's attributed to be by the evolution model. Number 11, agriculture is too recent. So the time when men began plowing and growing things, that also is a factor that would lead us to a young Earth age. And lastly, history is too short. And so we see in history that according to evolutionists, these Stone Age men existed for 100,000 years before beginning to make written records. And the written records started about 4,000 to 5,000 years ago. But we also know that ancient man made monoliths and monuments, and they made cave paintings. They kept detailed records of lunar phases. They had all kinds of observations they kept. So the question would be, why would he then wait centuries to produce writing in historical records? The historical record, history, written history, is too short for the long ages that is claimed by the evolutionist. So let's take a look at some of these. I'm just going to go through some of them. We don't have time to go through all 12, but again, I would encourage you to pick up this paper. They're very practical, really things you can learn pretty quickly, and there's some ammunition there. It's something to ponder on in terms of a long Earth versus a young Earth. Comets break up by the solar wind, and they cannot survive longer than 100,000 years. But most comets that we have on record are really, they attribute an age of about 10,000 years before they completely disintegrate due to the solar wind. Now, according to evolutionists, the comets are the same age as the solar system, about 5 billion years, that they were created and happened and occurred at the time of the Big Bang, when everything began to coalesce. So we have some problems with this view.